Hey guys, Kirk here, and thank you for joining me on a new video on the channel. In this video we're going to be looking at Tri-Planar Projection. I do have a previous video on Tri-Planar Projection, you'll see the link at the top of the screen now. If you want a deep explanation into what Tri-Planar Projection is, then go ahead and check that video out and come back. But in this video I will give like a brief description of what it's going to do. The way I'm going to structure this video is, this week's video is going to be about building up the albedo texture and the normal texture for our Tri-Planar Projection. And in next week's video we are going to be integrating that into a slope layer for our series BWV2, in which we're building a game world and we're up to the point of building our landscape shader. So like I say, in next week's video we are going to integrate today's logic with our landscape shader, and we're just going to make it in such a way where it's just the slope layer that we're building through Tri-Planar Projection. As always guys, I want to thank everyone who has subscribed and liked my videos. Like I say, it's giving me a big boost to keep doing these videos, which I am currently enjoying doing. So yeah, and thank you for all your support. There is a donation link in the description if you feel like donating. Any amount is much appreciated. If you do donate over a specific amount, you will have access to my DMs if you have any questions about videos or such things like that. There's also a link for our Discord, where lots of my subscribers are in there now, talking about videos. One more point I want to make is my throat is a little bit sore today, so if I don't sound like I normally do, which isn't great in the first place, then I apologise for that, but I'm still going to do the video anyway. Okay, so Tri-Planar Projection. What I've done here, I've made a little material, Tri-Planar Test, and I've essentially whacked this down on the landscape, as you can see here, just to showcase what the reasons why we would use Tri-Planar Projection. So, you can see if I look down here, you can see the texture has been applied to our landscape. No normals, as you can see here, it's just the albedo texture. And essentially when you apply a material to a landscape, it's just projected downwards like this onto the landscape. Like if I go over here, you can see like the texture's there, normal, but once we get to a steep slope angle like this, you can see that texture's being stretched because it's not being projected in that direction or this direction. It's just being projected downwards like so. So the more I come to the bottom here and the slope angle starts getting a bit more correct, you can see the texture is starting to get back to normal like it is here. So yeah, what Tri-Planar Projection will do, it will display our texture on the X, the Y and the Z axes all simultaneously, so this will reduce the amount of stretching that you get on sharp angles like this. So let's get straight into it. Let's start building up our logic in here. Like I say, I'm going to build the logic here. If you're using a separate landscape shader or you're making your own, integrating that into your particular landscape shader may be different from what I do next week, as all landscape shaders are built differently, so integrating it into your landscape shader this week's logic, you will have to work that out yourself, but yeah, I'll show you how to build the logic for Tri-Planar Projection this week, and next week I'll be integrating it into the landscape shader we are currently building in the series BWV2. Okay, so let's get cracking. So I've got a texture sample here. I'm going to change the sampler source to shared wrap, and I'm going to duplicate that 2 more times. Like I say, we need to project our texture on the X, Y and Z axes. So this first texture is our X, the second is our Y, and this is our Z. So what I need to do now is build up the UVs for such a task. I'm going to get world. Just right click and type world and get an absolute world position node, and this is going to get our world position in our world here. We're going to drag off that and get a divide node. This is going to control our UVs, our texture UVs. And then we can drag off the B input of our divider and get a scalar parameter. Just drag off it and type SCAL when you want the parameters, scalar parameter. And this is going to be global texture UVs, like so. This will have to be a fairly high number because we're using a divide node. I'll start with about maybe 1100, see how that goes. But before I put it into this divide, I want to get the absolute value of what we're changing to, and then I want to multiply it negatively. So if I get a multiplying, you'll see it in the 1, and the B we get a 1, we want a -1. And then we'll just simply drag that into the divide node, just like that. With how the absolute world position works, it's if I right click and start to preview it, you'll see it's color coded for each particular axis. You've got red, green here, and blue for the Z. What I want to do is to use a component mask to mask out particular axes, so I am only projecting on one single axis, if that makes sense. Let's stop previewing that. So from the divide node, I'm going to drag off it and get a component mask. And with this component mask, we can, like I say, mask out particular axes, so this will project on one axis alone. I'm not sure that makes sense, but let's just imagine this is our X like I did before, Y and Z. So this mask is going to be our X. So with the way this works, if you look at the bottom left here, you can see we've got a Z, which is blue, an X, which is red, and a Y, which is green. So like I say, our first one is X. So what I need to do is uncheck the red marker and mask out the G and B, which is our Z and Y. So now I'm just left with the X-axis exposed. I'm not sure what this will look like. I've not looked for a bit, but as you can see there, we've got our green and our red. We're masking out particular axes. It won't look right just yet, but it'll soon work. So we're going to drag that into the UVs of our texture sample. As you can see, the texture has gone squidgy because it's essentially portraying on one side. If you can see here, you see the stretching. Like so, that's the stretching you're seeing in the texture preview window because we're projecting onto the X-axis like so. So yeah, what we need now is the Y. So we'll duplicate our component mask and we'll mark out the red, untick the green and tick the red. That way we are masking out on this axis. If I drag that into the UVs, you can see now that stretch has become apparent there. So if I right click and start previewing this particular texture, you can see now we're portraying on the Y axis front and back, like so. We get that stretching on the X, like so. We'll stop previewing that node and then we'll get another component mask, and we'll need to do this for our Z axis. So we'll untick the blue axis, the blue colour, and tick the green, and now we're just portraying on the Z axis, like so. I'll just arrange these up a little bit messy at the minute. Well, it's going to be moved in a bit anyway. So, alright. That's that. What we need to do now is to blend these together, and we're going to use a linear interpolate. You can right click and type lerp, like so, and you'll see linear interpolate, or you can hold L on the keyboard and left click and get another lerp. Okay, so now we need to blend our X-axis into the B input of our lerp, and from the A input we're going to get our Y-axis, and then from the output of this lerp we're going to go into the A input of our secondary lerp, and then from the B we'll simply go into the Z axis, like so. If I drag that into the base color now, you should see we're getting that projection all over, but you're seeing a load of streaks and stretching still. So what we need to do is to build a mask which is going to drive these lerps. So what we're going to start with is a node called vertex normal in world space. It's under the coordinates. It's a lot similar to the absolute world position, but it's for normals, and we're going to use this to derive our mask for our blending. So from here we're going to get another component mask. We're going to drive through for our red, and we're also gonna duplicate that and get our Z axis. So we'll uncheck the green and we'll check the blue and uncheck the green and red. I'm going to do that. So I'm going to put this down here because we're probably, we're going to use the vertex normals for our normal mask a bit later on in the video. So line them correctly. I'm going to drag off this mask, get an absolute value again. Get the absolute value of this, duplicate it. We're doing essentially a mask, which is going to be the same, but one's for this alpha and one's for that alpha. But as you can see, we're deriving this blend on the X and this blend on the Z. Otherwise, you could just use the one mask. We're going to drag off our absolute value and get a cheap contrast. This is going to blend our particular projections together. But if we use a value of 0 in there, like so, we'll duplicate that, we'll drive that into there, drive that value into there, like so. And then we're just going to simply use a component mask for the, we'll use the same axes actually, like so. Okay, we'll drag that into that lerp there. We'll drag this one into that lerp. Let's move this mask out of the way. So if we go into here now, you can see that looks a lot better than it did before. And you're seeing all them lines. So if I apply this now, let that save, you can see now that stretching on our cliff sides has massively reduced. You'll still get stretching here, you get them weird artifact lines. They're very difficult to get rid of unless you're willing to have an expensive version of Tri-Planar Projection. For this one, I just want a fairly cheap one. So it still works, but it's not, massively great. But we are building a game shader, but this will still work for anyone else. Okay, so now we've made our albedo, I want to make the normal version as well. I've come to in layers, I think this is the Dirt A albedo. Yeah, so what I need is that normal. And we're going to drive our normal in here as well. We're going to use this same mask to drive our blending of our normals, but we've got a bit of calculation to do before we can start doing that. The first thing you do when you bring a texture sample in is to change it to shade wrap, as I always state. Then we'll duplicate this again for each axis, like so. We'll drag off our component mask into that UV, and then into that UV for the normal, and then this one as well. We'll bring this down a little bit, like so. Clearly see what that's doing now. Okay, so with the way these normals work, it's calculated a little bit differently. Essentially what we need to do is to get our axes from our normal vertex, our vertex normals, break them out and utilize them, and we need to do some calculation. I'm not 100% sure on how the calculation calculates it, if you like. Well, you can find loads of information online about how it's calculated. I just know this way I do Tri-Planar Projection has always worked for me, so I'm just going to do it the same way again. So I'm going to drag from my vertex normal in world space. Keep in mind that the vertex normal is in world space. We'll have to change that around later to tangent space. So I'm going to break out a float 3, so now effectively, like the component mask, I'm getting all 3 axes from this float 3. And we'll neaten that up a little bit. Okay, so essentially now we've got our bit of a vertex mask for our blending. What I'm going to showcase in this part now, guys, is using reroute declaration nodes. Reroute declaration nodes are a good addition to Unreal Engine for shader design, if you like, or making shaders up. It just cleans the graph up a hell of a lot more. But there is a stage at where you can overuse reroute declaration nodes. So if you just drag off the red channel of our breakout float 3 from our vertex normal and get the add named reroute declaration node, just click on that. And you can name them here. So I'm going to go VN for vertex normal underscore red, like so. You can actually change the colours here, so I may change this to a bright red, like so. Oh no, that's blue. Sorry, my bad. We'll change it to a bright red, even though that red. Yeah, so it's a bright red now. I'm going to drag off the green and get a reroute. You can just type RER and you'll get add named reroute declaration node. I just want to talk a bit about reroute declaration nodes in a minute. I'm just going to get it sorted first. Green, click away, and now we've got a green one. We'll change the colour to green, obviously. It just helps identify it more. Like so, and we'll get one for the blue as well. So reroute declaration node. Vertex normal underscore blue. Like so. We'll change the colour to blue. Like so. Even though it looks more like a purple, but anyway, it's all sorted. So an A. Like so. Okay, so reroute declaration nodes. What we're going to be doing here, like I say, I don't understand the calculation fully, but it does work if I remember how to do it, to be honest. You don't get the most accurate results ever known to man doing it this way, but it does work, like I say, with your normals, but some of the axes will be inverted, I think. But we'll try and normalize that out at the end. But like I was saying, reroute declaration nodes. So what these do, they essentially, we've created our red, green and blue, which are from the breakout. And I'm going to use the other side of it. So if you right click and go to name reroute nodes, you can see our particular outputs are here, and we can just simply say click on the red one, and now we could put this anywhere in our graph, and the information that's stored in this one from our breakout will then be behind the scenes transferred to this one. So wherever we plug this in away from the graph, away in this graph, we'll just travel through without the use of noodles going everywhere like this. Very useful, but there is use cases, what I've seen online, where these are incredibly overused. And what I mean by that is you may have this breakout with them things, a little mask, but your mask might be over here somewhere, and then you need to use this reroute over here, and then unless they're named completely accurately, it's going to be really difficult to use reroute names, reroute declaration nodes, and understand where the information is coming from and going to. I have seen some use cases, especially on Discord as well, and on some YouTube channels, where they've completely overused these. The only time I would use these is situations like this, where we're going to be sending noodles off everywhere, because here we're going to have an add node and a multiply, because we need to add our vectors together, if you like, our axes, like so. I'll move that down one. We're going to be using these, and then these outputs are going to be used here. So instead of having loads of noodles coming down here to each one like this and crisscrossing all over, I would utilize declaration reroute nodes, because you're still in the same area. It's not like this mask here is all the way down here and then I'm utilizing it up here. It's going to be fairly easy to read. So yeah, there's good times and bad times when to use a reroute declaration node. Okay, so from each of these texture samples I need a breakout, because I want to break out each axis for our normal axis, if you like. A lot of words, I know. And then we'll just do this. And we've got one for each now. And we've got these. We will need to add our X and Y with these X and Ys. There's got to be some blue channels, some Z channels thrown in there, but essentially we need to multiply our blue channels together. Like I said earlier on, don't ask me why, it's just what I've learned over the time. and it seems to work fine for me. So I'm going to highlight these because we need one set for each axis. So as you can see, this takes up a lot of space, so we could essentially move these over a bit. And what we need to do right now is to drag each of our red, green and blue channel from each one and put them into the B input of each of these nodes, like so. Just do that, and you've got to do this for each axis, so we'll just quickly do that. This one as well, and this will give me a clear indication of where I need to straighten up. Get that, we'll just move that down. This just has to come down a little bit, and this one will need to go up a little bit. And there you go. Now what we need to do is to use our reroute declaration nodes and put them into the opposing relevant slots. Sorry. What shall we do for the first one? So the first one is our red, and this is our red axis. So this will have to use the green. We're going to get our green reroute node. I'll put this here actually, and I'll do the blue, and then I could just come up here and duplicate these if and when I need them. Well, I'll need them all, but the first one is a green, so we're going to duplicate that output node, put that into the A. I think the next one is a red, right there, so green, nope, it's going to be a blue. So if I duplicate that blue, put that into there, and then obviously the last one is going to be a red, like so. But this is what I'm talking about with our reroute declaration nodes. It just looks a lot more cleaner in situations like this where it's easily readable. The next one, so we've done green, blue, red, so the next one's going to be a red here. I think the next one is a blue again. This may be incorrect, it depends on the invertation, if you like, of the normals, but we can always clean this up at a later date if it's not right. The next one will be green. And I think all these just match, so red, green and blue. So if I just duplicate them all, and these are just the same axes because it's the Z axes, like so. Yeah, I think that's how it goes. Let me think, we could delete them. Yeah, I think that is how it goes. We'll apply this just in case we crash. But we need to blend them together now. So technically we've got our mask from our vertex normal, and then we're breaking out each individual axis, each individual colour of each axis, and blending them together with our vertex normal. And then from here, at the moment they're individually out, so we need to make them back into a float 3 essentially. So we'll drag from the A and get what's called a make float 3, like so. Now these have to be added in a particular way. So essentially this is green, so this green is going to go into our Y. You think red, green and blue for our X, Y and Z, but it doesn't always work like that. So our blue is going to go into our Z, and this one is going to go into our X. I'm going to duplicate that because we need to do that for all these three. Oh gosh, I can't remember this X-axis, the Y-axis, how this is calculated back in. Let's go for our red to our blue, and this can go straight in our Y. This might not be right, I may have to come back in and do it again. These are simply like this, red, green, blue, because that's our Z axis, and you don't really have to change. Like I said at the beginning of the video, when you apply a landscape shader to a landscape, it's projected on the blue axis. So there's not much change needs to be done. As you can see, we're breaking out our red, green and blue, and we're just blending with our red, green and blue and straight into our float 3 red, green and blue. And now essentially that is done. So we need to get some layers like from our alpha, and just like alpha, just albedo, sorry, and we could just simply, like we did with our albedo, just blend these together like so, and this will be based off this mask that we did before, like so. From here, this may work now. Let's have a look. As you could see, completely massive values. Let me apply that. I may have to normalize this. Yeah, it doesn't look great. So I'll drag off this last lerp and get what's called a normalize. Normalized node, and what this does is the normalized expression calculates and outputs the normalized value of its input. This means each component of the input is divided by the L2 norm length of the vector. I'm not 100% sure on that. It's not necessarily normalized expression which plugs into a normal material output. Right, okay, well we'll do it anyway. I think you have the inverted version of this as well. Oh wait there. We need to go back to tangent space. So if we drag off our normalize and get a transform, it's a vector operation. You can use transform position or just a transform. And I want to transform from world space to tangent space. So that should clean up the normals. It looks a bit better. We apply this now. Yeah, that looks okay. It looks fine actually. Get a bit of dark shadow here. I may have to work on this a little bit. Maybe if I drag that X on the blue, the green. Oh, just like auto save, even though I need to apply the shader. Let's see what happens here. Let's build world. It's a lot better now. What I'm looking for, guys, is if it's inverted or not. You can still see some lines here from where the textures are projected overlapping. You'll hardly see them on slopes like this. But on slopes where it's like this, you can still see a bit of stretching where it's trying to project. But because the inclination is so steep, it's not going to work right. Like if I look around this weird structure part here, you can clearly see it. If I slow this down, you can clearly see it. Like so. But yeah, that's pretty successful. I'm happy with them normals. I'm happy with the albedo. That's pretty successful in my eyes. So I'm looking for inverted normals. I'm not seeing any. Remember this, guys. You need to remember how this is. So maybe it's a good idea to take a screenshot and make sure you connect all these up exactly like I've done here. You should have done if you followed along. Well, if you connect them up like that and add the masks, then you should be good to go with your Tri-Planar Projection. Okay, so I think that is it for this week's video. Now we've established ourselves to have our albedo, Tri-Planar Projection and its mask, and the way we're going to calculate our normals using the vertex normal in world space. And because we did all this calculation, it put it into tangent space, world space, because of our normals, and so we just had to convert it back to tangent space and then import it. This will work for any material layer you're using. I advise to use it maybe only on a material layer that's going to be sloped or stretched. I would not advise to use it on every single layer you've got on your landscape shader, because tri-planar projection is fairly expensive. As you can see, just for this bit of logic, it's on a base pass is 255 instructions and a max sampler 316, even though we're only sampling 4 out of 16, even though we've got 6 textures here. The instructions 267, and that's just this bit of logic. Tri-planar projection is quite expensive, so like I say, I would advise on using it on a slope instead of using it everywhere in your landscape shader. That's just a bit of advice from me. But that is it from this video. Hopefully you've learned something and your tri-planar projection is working. Like I say, in next week's video we are going to be integrating tri-planar projection into our slope layer for our game world landscape shader, so look forward to that. If you're interested in making game worlds, then check the series out as a whole, and I shall see you in next week's video, guys. Thank you, bye.